Nigerian internet on fire this week. Unity will only be possible if Christians convert to Islam. When you see a quote like that attributed to a name as heavy as Sheikh Gumi, you stop scrolling, you freeze. And then the questions start flying. Did he really say that? Is this the plan? Is this why the bandits are running wild? Is this why the US is threatening sanctions? We have gone deep, and I mean really deep, into the archives and the current reality of 2025 to bring you the full, unvarnished truth about this statement. Because, honestly, if we don't clear this up right now, this headline alone could start a riot. We are seeing this quote splashed across WhatsApp statuses, Facebook groups, and YouTube thumbnails, causing panic among Christians and defensive reactions among Muslims. But here is the twist that most people are missing. This quote is real, but the context is what makes it a ticking time bomb in today's political climate. We are going to break down exactly where this statement came from, why it is trending right now in late 2025, and how it connects to the massive diplomatic war currently brewing between Sheikh Ahmad Gumi, the Tinubu administration, and the United States government under Donald Trump. This is not just about religion, this is about the survival of Nigeria as a united entity. If you are just joining us on this journey to uncover the truth behind the headlines, please do me a massive favor and smash that like button. It helps the algorithm push this factual breakdown to more Nigerians so they don't get misled by fake news. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. You need to be here for these updates because the mainstream media is too scared to touch this story with a 10-foot pole. Let's start with the Quality Magazine interview. The text causing all this chaos is a transcript from an interview with Quality Magazine where Gumi was asked about Nigerian unity. His response? Nigerian unity, if I am to do my best, is to try to convert Christians and non-Muslims as much as possible until the other religions become minority and they will not affect our society. Now, here's the fact check that you need to know before you start typing in the comments. This specific interview was actually granted by the late Sheikh Abubakar Gumi, the father of the current Sheikh Ahmed Gumi, back in October 1987. Yes, you heard me right, 1987. So why is a 38-year-old quote trending in December 2025? Why are people sharing it as if it was said yesterday morning? The answer lies in what is happening right now in Nigeria.
Like I said,
The ghost of the father's words is being resurrected because the son, Sheikh Ahmad Gumi, has taken a stance in 2025 that many Nigerians feel echoes this exact sentiment. The internet never forgets, and in the heat of the current clash between Gumi and the Christian community, people dug up this old file to say, look, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. This has been the agenda all along. To understand why this old quote has gone viral now, we have to look at the events of November 2025. It has been a month of fire. It started when the US President-elect Donald Trump made a terrifying threat against the Nigerian government. Trump explicitly warned that if the killing of Christians in Nigeria, which he labeled as a genocide, did not stop, he would unleash fast, vicious, and sweet military consequences. This sent shockwaves through Aso Rock. But while the government was trying to be diplomatic, Sheikh Ahmad Gumi came out swinging. In a video that went viral in late November 2025, Gumi did not just deny the allegations, he practically declared war on the idea of American intervention. He stated clearly there is no Christian genocide in Nigeria. He dismissed the massacres in Plateau, Benue, and southern Kaduna as clashes or banditry, not a religious war. This denial infuriated the Christian Association of Nigeria and millions of Christians who feel under siege. And this is where the connection to the 1987 quote comes in. When Gumi, the son, denies that Christians are being targeted, while his father in the resurfaced quote said unity is only possible if Christians convert, it paints a terrifying picture for the average Nigerian Christian. It reinforces the fear that the bandits Gumi defends are actually foot soldiers of a religious conquest. Let's look at Gumi's 2025 ultimatum. He didn't just stop at denying the genocide. In early November 2025, Gumi issued what many called a treasonous ultimatum to President Bola Tinubu. He demanded that Tinubu summon the US ambassador and force a retraction of the Christian genocide claim. If the US refused, Gumi said Nigeria should sever diplomatic ties with this irresponsible regime. Think about that for a second. A private citizen, a cleric, telling the president to cut ties with the world superpower because they raised an alarm about the killing of Christians. This audacity is what made people go digging into the Gumi family history, finding that Quality magazine interview to prove that this specific brand of radicalism has deep roots. And let's be honest, 2025 has not been a good year for Sheikh Ahmad Gumi's international reputation. Remember May 2025? That was a huge embarrassment. Sheikh Ahmad Gumi packed his bags, got his visa, and flew to Saudi Arabia for the Hajj pilgrimage. But what happened? The Saudis detained him. They didn't want him there. They eventually deported him back to Nigeria. Gumi himself posted on Facebook that the Saudis were uncomfortable with his presence due to his views on world politics. So, if the custodians of Islam's holiest sites, Saudi Arabia, find his views uncomfortable, what does that tell you? It tells you that his rhetoric is considered dangerous even within the Islamic world. So when he comes back to Nigeria and starts telling us that Christians are not being killed for religion, while the Saudis themselves are wary of him, it raises red flags. Now, let's touch on the Nnamdi Kanu angle because this also happened in late November 2025 and it exposes a massive double standard that is fueling the viral spread of this Christian conversion headline. On November 25th, 2025, just days after Nnamdi Kanu was sentenced to life imprisonment, Sheikh Ahmad Gumi came out with a statement. He said he would be at the forefront of pushing for amnesty for Kanu if Kanu showed remorse. He compared Kanu to the Niger Delta militants and even the bandits, saying, "This is how we are." But here is the catch that Nigerians are pointing out. Gumi fights tooth and nail for amnesty for bandits who burn down villages. He offers a conditional olive branch to Nnamdi Kanu, but when the US tries to protect Christians from being slaughtered, he threatens to cut diplomatic ties. This perceived bias is why the 1987 quote is resonating so hard right now. It feels like the missing puzzle piece that explains his behavior. People are sharing it to say he doesn't want peace, he wants what his father wanted, dominance. The Quality magazine interview also had another chilling section. The interviewer asked, "One of Nigeria's problems is that of unity. How much can Islam help?" And Gumi answered, "Until the other religions become minority and they will not affect our society." In 2025, is this happening? Look at the demographics in the north. Look at the displacement in the Midbelt. When villages are burned and people are forced into IDP camps, they lose their voting power, they lose their land, and they lose their influence. Critics are arguing that the banditry in the Northwest and North Central is effectively achieving the goal stated in that 1987 interview, making the other religions irrelevant or a minority in those regions through force and displacement. So, while Sheikh Ahmad Gumi might not have said those exact words this morning, his actions in 2025 are breathing new life into his father's words. He has become the face of a narrative that refuses to acknowledge the religious dimension of Nigeria's crisis, even when the rest of the world, including the US president, is shouting it from the rooftops. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think it is fair to judge Sheikh Ahmad Gumi by his father's words from 1987? Or do you think his actions in 2025, defending bandits, fighting the US, and denying Christian persecution, prove that he shares the same vision? This is a sensitive topic, but we have to talk about it. And please, before you go, remember that information is power. The people sharing this headline without context might be trying to incite violence, but we are sharing it with context to incite understanding. We need to know the history to understand the present.
Let's stop pretending this is complicated. A Nigerian imam posted a video telling Christians that they should convert to Islam if they want to avoid harm in Nigeria. Not spiritual harm, not social pressure, physical harm. That statement alone should have triggered arrests, investigations, and public condemnation. Instead, it triggered excuses, and those excuses are how this story keeps repeating. Words don't float in failed states. In stable countries, words are opinion. In fragile states, words are signals. Nigeria is not a stable country. It is a fractured state where large regions are effectively ungoverned, where armed groups enforce ideology, and where religious identity often determines whether you live, flee, or disappear. So when a religious authority says, "convert to be safe," that is not commentary, that is a forecast. And Christians in Nigeria already understand that forecast because they've been living inside it for years. Nigeria has over 220 million people, roughly half Muslim, roughly 40% Christian, and a massive fault line running through the north and the middle belt. That fault line is soaked in blood. This did not start yesterday. Islamist violence in Nigeria did not begin with this video, it did not begin with social media, it did not begin with poverty, and it did not begin with misunderstandings. It began openly in 2009 when Boko Haram launched a full insurgency. Over the next decade and a half, more than 35,000 people were killed, around 2.5 million were displaced, thousands of women and girls were abducted, churches, schools and villages were erased. These are conservative numbers. This is not disputed history. This is documented reality. Boko Haram's targets were not random. They targeted Christian schools, clerics who rejected their ideology, Muslims who refused to comply. That last point matters and we'll return to it. But make no mistake. Christians were a primary target, not collateral damage. So when someone tells Christians to convert to avoid harm, they are not inventing danger. They are referencing a pattern that already exists. Named regions, named bodies. Let's stop hiding behind generalities. This violence has addresses. Borno State. The epicenter of Boko Haram activity. Entire Christian communities destroyed between 2013 and 2018. Churches burned, priests executed, survivors fled permanently. Adamawa State, repeated attacks on Christian villages, forced displacement, no return. Plateau State, the Middle Belt. This is where denial does its worst work. Between 2018 and 2023, over 200 villages attacked, more than 1,500 civilians killed, victims overwhelmingly Christian farming communities. These are not clashes. You don't burn churches first in a cattle dispute. You don't target priests to solve grazing routes. You don't spare Muslim villages by accident. This is selective violence. The herder lie. Here's one of the most dishonest reframes in modern conflict reporting. International media often describe these attacks as Fulani herder-farmer clashes. That framing is convenient. It strips ideology out of violence. It turns terror into economics, but many of the militias involved use Islamist rhetoric, threaten survivors with forced conversion, destroy churches while leaving mosques intact, target Christian settlements disproportionately. This is not random banditry, it is religiously coded violence, and when an imam tells Christians to convert for safety, he is verbalizing the logic these militias already enforce. The phrase, "this isn't Islam," is a deflection. At this point we need precision, not slogans. This is not Islam as practiced by all Muslims, but it is Islam as interpreted by Islamist movements operating in Nigeria. And denying that does not protect Muslims, it protects extremists. Islamist groups in Nigeria quote scripture, cite religious authority, frame violence as obligation, present conversion as submission, not belief that is not accidental. That is ideological. Claim, "You're demonizing Muslims." Response: Islamist groups also kill Muslims. Extremists target dissenters first. This matters because denial creates cover. When you refuse to name ideology, you allow it to operate uncontested. The state failure that makes this possible. Now let's talk about the Nigerian state, because none of this survives without permission. The Nigerian government routinely downplays religious motivation, rebrands massacres as communal clashes, avoids prosecuting Islamist militias, fails to protect rural Christian communities. Why? Because acknowledging Islamist violence threatens northern political alliances, military credibility, domestic stability narratives, international optics. So instead, the language gets softened, and softened language produces hard deaths. Prosecutions are rare, convictions are minimal, arrests without trial are common. That is not neutrality. That is abdication. This imam is not an outlier. Now let's address the claim you're already hearing. It's just one imam. No, extremist systems do not rely on lone actors. They rely on alignment. Violence does not begin with bullets. It begins with normalization. When clerics, frame conversion as survival, describe violence as inevitable, imply compliance equals safety. They are not ordering attacks. They are preparing the ground. Claim, he didn't call for violence. Response, threat normalization precedes violence, always. That is how every ideological terror movement works. What conversion really means? Let's be honest about the word being used so casually. In these regions, conversion does not mean belief. It means public renunciation under threat, loss of land and home, permanent displacement, continued suspicion anyway. Many who convert are still attacked, because submission does not guarantee safety, it only delays violence. This is not faith. It is coerced survival. Western complicity through silence. Here's the bitter part. Western commentators, NGOs, and media outlets are often more afraid of being called Islamophobic than of telling the truth. So they avoid naming Islamist ideology, reframe religious violence as economic conflict, treat victims as statistics instead of communities, that silence functions as protection for perpetrators. Intent doesn't matter, impact does. Say it cleanly. Nigeria is not heading toward religious persecution, it is already there. When a cleric tells Christians to convert to avoid harm, he is not speculating. He is describing a system that already works because the state allows it to. This is not about Islam versus Christianity, it is about Islamist terrorism operating unchecked in a weak state while the world keeps pretending naming it is worse than letting it happen. If you cannot name it, you cannot stop it. And Nigeria's Christians already know the cost of that silence. Not left, not right, just real.